You've had arguments with people who weren't even in the room. You've rehearsed conversations that never happened, replayed ones that did, felt anger, felt relief, sometimes even cried, completely alone, in complete silence, just inside your own head. And the scariest part? You were completely right. There is something happening in your mind that most people will never experience. Not because they're smarter, not because they're healthier, but because their minds simply don't go where yours goes. And I need you to stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you will reframe something you've probably spent years being ashamed of. You have a whole world inside your head, a world with its own conversations, its own unfinished arguments, its own courtrooms, where you're the judge, the lawyer, and sometimes the person on trial. Other people watch TV to unwind. You sit in silence and somehow end up in a 3-hour mental debate about something that happened 4 years ago. And you've called this a problem. You've labeled it anxiety, overthinking, being in your head too much. But what if the label was wrong? What if the so-called problem is actually the most sophisticated thing about you? Here's what research actually shows. Psychologist Charles Fernyhough spent years studying inner speech, the ongoing monologue and dialogue that happens inside human minds. And what he found was striking. Not everyone has this. Some people experience almost no inner voice at all. They think in feelings, impulses, and images, but not in words, not in conversations, not in full scenes that play out like films. But then there are people like you, people whose inner world is so vivid, so populated, so alive, that silence is never actually silent. There's always something being processed, something being turned over, something being understood. And here's the part that will stay with you. The people with the richest inner dialogue tend to score significantly higher in emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and moral reasoning. Your mind isn't broken, it's running a more advanced program, but that doesn't explain where it came from. And I think that part matters most. Because you weren't born talking to yourself this way. Something taught you to go inside. Think back, not to the big moments, but to the small ones, the quiet ones. The moments when you were a child and something happened inside you. Confusion, hurt, fear, excitement. And you looked around for somewhere to put it. Was there someone there? Was there someone who could hold what you felt without dismissing it, minimizing it, or turning it into something about themselves? For many of us, and maybe for you, the honest answer is no. Not because no one loved you, but because emotional depth is rare. Most adults were never taught to sit inside someone else's feelings. They were taught to fix feelings, redirect feelings, or pretend feelings don't exist. So when you came to them with something too big, too confusing, too much, there was nowhere to put it. And a child who has nowhere to put what they feel doesn't stop feeling. They just stop showing it. They take it inside. They build a room in their mind where it's safe, where nothing gets dismissed, where they can replay what happened until it finally makes sense, where they can say all the things they weren't allowed to say out loud. That room became your inner world. And that inner world, it never went away. There's a term in psychology called self-soothing through internal dialogue. It sounds clinical, but the lived experience of it is something you know intimately. It's 2 a.m., and something is bothering you that you can't explain to anyone. So you explain it to yourself. You walk yourself through it. You argue with yourself. You reach a conclusion. You feel just slightly better. No one else was in that room, but you weren't alone. And that's the thing about people like you. You learned early on that your own mind could be a companion when the world couldn't be. That your inner voice could be a witness when no one else was paying attention. That is not dysfunction. That is one of the most profound forms of self-reliance a human being can develop. But here's the question that matters, and I want you to sit with it. What happens when a survival strategy outlives the danger it was built for? Because here's what I've noticed about people who think this deeply, who live this fully inside their own minds. At some point, the inner world becomes easier than the outer one. You've already had the conversation in your head, perfectly, completely, exactly the way you needed it to go. And then you try to have it in real life and the other person doesn't follow the script. They interrupt. They miss the point. They respond in ways your inner version of them never would. And slowly, without realizing it, real conversation starts to feel like a downgrade. Why would you share something vulnerable with someone who might not understand when your own mind already understands it perfectly? Why would you explain yourself to someone who might judge you when the voice inside you never does? So you go quiet, not because you have nothing to say, but because you have too much to say and no one who feels safe enough to say it to. and the people around you start to see someone who is calm, composed, maybe a little mysterious, someone who seems fine. They don't see the symphony playing behind your eyes. They don't see the cathedral. And this right here, is the wound that most people with minds like yours carry. Not the overthinking, not the replaying, not the inner conversations, the isolation of it. The feeling that the most real version of you has never been fully witnessed by another human being. The ache of being someone whose inner life is vast and rich and extraordinary, but who has learned through years of quiet evidence that showing it is a risk not worth taking. You've been let down before. You trusted someone with the real you and they fumbled it. Or you started to open and felt the shift in their attention. That subtle signal that said, this is more than I can hold. So you took it back, and you went inside, and you told yourself, that's fine. I have everything I need in here, and it was true. And it was also the loneliest thing you've ever done. Here's what I want you to understand, and this is the part I need you to actually hear, not just listen to. The inner conversation you have with yourself is not the problem. The problem is that it was never supposed to be the only conversation you had. It was supposed to be the preparation, the rehearsal, the deep inner work that makes real connection possible, not the replacement for it. You were built for depth. That's obvious. The way your mind works proves it. But depth, real depth, is relational. It has to go somewhere. It has to meet something. And when it never does, when it just keeps circling inside, it starts to feel like a gift that has no one to give it to. Healing, for someone like you, doesn't look like silencing the inner voice. It doesn't look like just stop overthinking or be more present or any of the advice that people who don't think like you have been handing you your whole life. Healing looks like this: one conversation, one real one, with one person who is safe enough, where you say something true, something that lives in the inner world, and you let it exist out loud. Just for a moment, just to see what happens. Not a performance, not an explanation, just one honest thing, and you notice whether the world ends. It won't. The inner world you've built is not evidence that you're broken. It's evidence that you were paying attention when most people weren't, that you took your own emotional life seriously when the people around you couldn't, that you built something extraordinary inside yourself, alone, without a blueprint, without anyone teaching you how. That took strength, more than most people will ever know. And the version of you that did that, the child who went inside because outside wasn't safe, the person who built a whole world just to survive it, that version of you deserves something, not fixing, not silencing, just, finally, being known. You are not too much. You are not broken. You are not someone who thinks too deeply or feels too intensely or lives too far inside their own head. You are someone whose mind was built for a level of connection most people have never experienced. And that level of connection, it's still possible. It starts, like everything in your life has always started, with a conversation. This time, maybe, with someone who's ready to listen.